Okay.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Men's Room. Today we're joined by the hosts of Linda, the transformational re-engineer of life, and myself, the bearded wordsmith. Today we're going to be discussing how to elevate yourself to get a high level partner and some of the roadblocks and solutions you might face with dating and relationships. So did you want to take it off, or would you like me to, Linda?
Oh, I'll absolutely jump right in. This topic excites me. And the reason why is because I think that a lot of times men have an idea of what they think a woman would want, and how they think that they should show up could be different. And they end up talking themselves down and not actually putting who they authentically are out to a person. And so when they do that, they sell themselves short. And so I'd like to talk about the things that would be present, both in their attributes and the behaviors that they would exhibit, so they can meet that high quality woman, so they can elevate their best presence.
See, what's some of the biggest challenges and annoyances that you found with trying to date when you were younger and stuff before you met your current partner?
Hmm. So I would say it's that confidence in self. And that could be both the confidence in myself and then confidence in people that I would date. Because without that, there isn't that conversation that can get struck up. And there's nothing worse than wanting to meet somebody but not feeling good enough to be able to have that conversation. And so you put yourself in a lot lower energy, and instead of putting that wonderful person that you are out there and taking that risk of getting to know another person.
See, do you feel it's due to the lack of confidence mainly, or do you think it's because of exterior factors? And I'll touch upon some of those exterior factors here soon.
I think it's a combination of both. I think that there are some external factors of what society says a good provider man is, and what women can also be in a partner too. And so I think sometimes that men and women really want the same thing in a partner, but they might go about it in a different way, or they might listen to some of the societal stereotypes. And so when they start to listen to the stereotypes, or they take the experience that their friend has been in, or maybe one that they've been in, they tend to introduce or bring that same energy into all future relationships. And so that can become a real problem if you're not a real confident person, or you don't really value yourself in the way that you could, and put yourself in a position to meet the type of people that you would like to go into relationship with.
Would you say that's having negative expectations or too high of standards when you're going into certain relationships?
It could be, yes, it could be. You could put a person on a pedestal. And when I say that, what I mean is you might be more in love with the idea of who that person could be, versus seeing who they actually are, and, caring for and getting to meet that person where they are, and that person in front of you. I think that a lot of times things go south when there's unmet expectations. And so thank you for bringing that up. I think that that happens more often than not.
Definitely. It's from my point of view, when it comes to dating and trying to find the right partner, it's an interesting topic because it is a combination of confidence but also worry. Because when you go to approach a woman, you're worried about so many things, of them rejecting you, to them giving you false allegations of you doing something you're not. And from the confidence point of view, it's because men, I feel, have lost that spark of how to be romantic, how to think outside the box, and really just the basics of, instead of just trying to have one date and then get in a relationship, they should go on multiple dates and understand the person that they're trying to be with before they actually make that decision. So that way, when they are in that relationship, they're a lot more informed behind their likes, dislikes, what they like to do and stuff like that. And I think that's why men fall short nowadays, because when Tinder came out, it changed a lot of the dating game. A lot of people would just jump on that, go sleep together, and then all of a sudden be in a relationship. And I've got certain mates like that have found their life partners through that app, but at the same time, it ruins that intimate connection and the old school way of just taking a woman out on a date, treating her to a meaningful experience, and then getting to know her at the same time. So I feel that's sort of fallen away from where men should be, because a lot of men think, oh, I can just ask her to be in a relationship and that's how it's going to be. But that's not the case. Often we overlook the simplest ways in which we can um, elevate the way in which we are. Having that little bit of romanticism and asking the woman out on a date will um, increase the likelihood that you end up in a successful relationship, opposed to just having even one small date of going to the movies or something and then asking them straight out. You should be making meaningful connections in the beginning, because you might not choose that partner, but at least you may have found a bit of a friend, or you may have gained insight into how to treat a woman, because not every date's going to go well. Some dates will go bad, some dates will go good, depending on what you do and what they do. There's certain flags to watch out for, and that's where you get to know these things, because I can't speak upon them all because each person is different. They have different values and different things they look for in a partner. And that's where I say to most people, use common sense. That's mostly the biggest thing with dating, is to use common sense. If something doesn't feel right, just sort of step back a little bit. Still pursue the dates, but don't go and don't get it as involved, because if there's something making the dates feel funny, or if you're unsure about certain bits of information, be careful, because sometimes things can lead you astray. Women can exude a false facade, and I've experienced that myself. When you date a woman, it's like much like when they wear that much makeup, but then they take it off, they look like a completely different person. The same goes with their personality. You may take them out on a date, but then they portray a false personality of who they are. They're trying to make themselves look better, and then once you get to know them, that's not the real person in which you would have liked to have been. So finding someone real in today's times is very hard and very difficult, because a lot of women set such high expectations of what a man should be, but they don't realize that if they want a high level man, or a man that's going to treat them well, then they themselves have to be willing to understand that it's not going to be coming across their lap every now and again, or every date, because a lot of men are hit and miss nowadays. A lot of men just don't have that confidence, that's um, I'd say mainly confidence required to take a woman out on a date and think outside the box with being romantic. Even myself have fallen short of being romantic in the beginning when I started dating, because it's hard to know what a woman wants. And once you start going on dates, it's good for communication. Communication is another vital thing. If the woman doesn't tell you what she wants, then how are you meant to know? And that's when arguments and fights can arise, because if you sit there and you assume, then you usually make an idiot out of yourself. But if you sort of have a civil conversation together and be like, I don't mind going for hikes, or I don't mind going and being a bit of an adrenaline junkie and going skydiving or something, that's when you can pursue those sort of opportunities, as long as she gives you the basic information to go off of what her likes are and what her dislikes, then you can pursue those avenues of what she likes. So you could take her on a nice hike or something, or go for a dinner, or go for a skydive and then a dinner or something, or you could go bungee jumping. There's so many opportunities to be had there. You don't have to have a traditional date where you sit down and at a restaurant, even though that is still nice. It's good to think outside the box when it comes to these sort of activities, because it's making a meaningful first impression. That's what really counts. And if you've only got 3 dates to go on before you really decide, then you want to make those 3 dates as meaningful and as important as you can. So would you like to add to anything?
Oh, actually, I have several thoughts here. One of the first things that comes to mind is that when you're meeting someone, we all put our best selves forward, the one side of ourselves that we want people to see, which is still it's a good thing. And you should be putting that side of yourself that is your side of the self, because there's nothing worse than meeting somebody and then realizing that that person that they showed you was not really who they were. They were putting themselves out there in the way that they thought that you would like them. And the best relationships happen when you, like you said, that you actually ask the person questions. You share your values. You talk about the things that are important to you. And thinking outside the box, I think that this idea of actually going into a conversation about what you most value and what you have for your ambitions and goals in life, I think that I would rather know upon meeting somebody that either we were aligned and I wanted to explore it further, or no, we have some differences and it isn't really where I would like to go. But at the same time, you can't get it normally out of 1, 2, 3 dates. It's going to be 3, 4 months, and it's about doing different things. Because it can be fun to go out to dinner and movies, or to go hiking, skydiving, all these different things. And honestly, you've got to find out where those commonalities exist of things that you want to do both together, but then also have that life outside of the relationship where you get to explore those things too. And I think, you talked about the signs, like what to look for. And I think for men and women together, I think it matters most that a person is showing the side of themselves that they are. But the things that I like to look for is, how does a person treat their family, their friends? Do they have ambition? Do they have anything that excites them? And, looking at some of those areas are good, because honestly, would you want to date somebody that doesn't treat their family or friends in a good way, or somebody that doesn't have something that is exciting to them and have an ambition to go forward in life? I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to have the deepest pocketbook or the most education or all these other accolades. And so, because a lot of times people think that they have to have all of these things and that they have to have all of their life all perfectly together. And so, that bar is really high if you're trying to put yourself in that place, because none of us are developed in all areas where everything is like that. And I think that's where it begins to fall apart, when those expectations of the self, and then the expectations are so high on other people. I've seen some women that they have a checklist of what the man should have, and nobody can meet the ideal. Nobody. And I think that men could do that as well. Yeah, I mean, and it's not, we talked about confidence being important, sense of humor. Those are really important, because if you don't have a sense of humor, and you are not like willing to be vulnerable, if you're not willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there, then you can't get to meet somebody. And none of us wants to go into a relationship and get hurt, but you can't love anybody if you don't love yourself first, and you can't love another person if you're not willing to be that vulnerable person, that softer side. And that's both of men and women. The softer side should come through. And so, what else do you think that you would add to this list?
I definitely agree upon being vulnerable. That's one key that I didn't touch upon, and that's crucial. It's just being your real self, not being afraid to be in your own skin, so to speak, because a lot of people nowadays will put on that false facade thinking that's what the woman wants, but really they just want someone who's honest, truthful, and shows that bit of vulnerability while also being that strong man that they look for. And the other side of the token is, if you're not meeting the partners that you'd like, whether you be male or female, that's usually because you're either looking in the wrong places, or you haven't made yourself um, worthy of those high level partners. Most times we go to punch above our weight and find those people that are a 10 out of 10 and then end up with a 4, because we don't sit there and realize that we are probably a 4 ourselves, or even lower than that. So it's elevating yourself through crucial things like having a steady income, or like having a steady job so you can provide for yourself. Definitely treating your family right. It's the good old how they treat a waiter. example is if they treat you amazing, but they treat a waiter like shit, then that tells you all you need to know about that person. And same goes for their family. If they treat their family like shit, then you know wholeheartedly what they're going to be doing behind closed doors in 6 months. They're probably going to treat you like shit as well. So, but if they treat everyone with respect and how they want to be treated, then usually that's a really big green flag. And just being financially stable, because there's nothing worse than when you're with someone who's from job to job or doesn't know what they want to do with their career in life. And most people nowadays just think of the short term. They don't think of their long-term goals of where they want to be in 50 years or even what they want to be remembered by. Most people nowadays live in the moment, and that's where you'll find a lot of partners that fall short of what you expect because they haven't really asked those deep, meaningful questions. And that's where you have to go besides the pub to find someone of high value. Sometimes it could even be a work colleague that you've built up a relationship with over the past 6 months of working with. And you might not realize that that could be a potential partner because you more see her as a friend more than someone that you could be in a relationship with. And I've seen people be with get with partners from the pub and from the work, and I'd say probably from the work lasts a lot longer and they have a more meaningful connection because they've had that time to get to know one another, to know where their humor is, what they like, what they dislike. Where you meet someone at the pub, you're usually half sloshed, and same with the other person, and you make a bad decision, then all of a sudden you've got a kid 9 months later. So there's certain places that I've seen that happen, and I grew up around that. And I've got a good mate who went down the wrong road and got drunk too many times and ended up knocking up his girlfriend, and then regretted it after 2 kids later because she turned out to be um, a real bitch. No other way to put it. So, and that's where it's just looking at those initial red flags in the beginning and what is a green flag, because everyone's green flags and red flags are different subjectively. And the biggest thing that I say to men is think before you do something, really think about it. If you're unsure, go for a walk, sleep on the decision before you make it, because we often act out of the wrong emotion sometimes, or we act on impulse, and that's not the way in which you should be. And it goes for women as well, because they do the same sort of things, but from my perspective, males usually do it more. And that's one of the things that I've sort of found is males need to think about the decisions in which they make. And you're right with when it comes to dating, sometimes you won't find the required information over 3, 4, or 5 dates. Sometimes it does take a few months of getting to know the person. But I'm on the other side of the fence as well. Is usually if it's a good partner, you get to know everything you need to know within the 3 to 5 date range, because they should be as vulnerable as you and as open, and you should be able to have open courses of dialogue. Yes, you're not going to agree upon everything. You're going to have differences, but any good couple is able to overcome those and understand that one person might have a certain opinion, but doesn't mean that they don't want to be with that person because their opinion differs to your own. It's just about educating yourself about their opinions, about what their likes and dislikes are, and understanding the person. Not always are you going to agree with your partners on every single decision, and that's understanding that. Some couples do have fights, and it's not like a big blowout where they're yelling across at each other, but it's just small things where they have a disagreement, or they don't they don't want to watch a certain movie, or just something small, and that's where that can turn into something bigger if you don't understand the reason why in which they don't like that certain movie, or they don't want to do that activity, and certain things like that. So anything you'd like to add to that, Lynn?
Well, you're right on that front there, because relationships, whether you're in the beginning of them or if you've been in one for quite a length of time, it's not like it's a one and done where you reach an elevated relationship and everything's all great. Things are going to come up. Life is going to happen. And the best relationships are the ones where instead of having the breakdown in communication where the voices are being raised, people are going silent, and there isn't that healthy communication, because more likely than not, if you can get in the other person's shoes for just a moment, even when it's hard, and like you said it, you find out what it is that is triggering them to this reaction, because chances are And this is what I found, that it's not even the thing that's the contention of the disagreement or the argument. It's something deeper to that. And if you ask the question in a way that you're curious to find out, you're going to be in a much different place than if you go to the violence or the silence. You're not going to get there, and it's just going to further make it difficult to come back to the place that you need to be, which is that place that you were when you you first met. And so people, they get lost in that sometimes. And you can hear it when people are talking about something that has either been an unmet need or something that their values are in conflict with their partners. And if they can get to that common ground, they can get to that common ground, they can change the trajectory. But we get so stuck in our own heads, right? It's like, I want my thing to be known, and by gosh darn it, I'm going to get this point across. And really, when you argue to win or to get your point across, you lose. When you actually get curious, that's when the wins happen, and you can find that connecting point and change the trajectory.
I
And
guess that'd be making yourself look like an idiot in the moment by asking the questions that need to be asked, rather than making yourself look like a bigger idiot later from assumptions or unknowns. And that's where most people, regardless of your sex, just lack that bit of confidence that is required to be like, well, what do you like doing here? Or do you like these types of movies or this music? Because they don't want to be perceived as someone as an idiot, because some questions are idiotic in nature, but you don't know unless you ask. And that's the biggest thing with relationships. A lot of people nowadays are willing to just assume or not ask a question. You might see your partner walking around with the shits, or might be doing something one day that's just sort of putting you off, and you don't ask them why, then you end up in a fight later. But if you ask them why earlier in that day, then you might come to an understanding that they might have had a really hard day at work. They might have been treated badly by family members. They could have had a myriad of issues. And once you've talked about it, it allows them to tell someone, which makes them feel better at the end of the day. Lets them have someone that understands them at the same time and gets rid of that angst in the air, so to speak.
I like that you said that, because that one there is really important, because we don't all have good days. Sometimes we have hard ones, and that moment where we're snapping and not keeping our cool. Yeah, there's something to be said. And so if that's not the person's normal demeanor, something's up. And you're right, sitting down and saying, I'm observing you're a little bit on the short side today. What's that about? And just calling attention to it. And, sometimes a person may be so into whatever's going on that they're not even aware of how they're coming across. And, being vulnerable enough to have that conversation. And, not everything is easy to talk about, but it should be, because if
Mm.
you're with somebody, you should be able to talk about anything, what the good, bad, and in between. And yeah, and so really, we covered a lot of things on how to have that high quality person that you want. And what I'm getting at, and what you're getting at, is that how we choose to come in, whether we're being our authentic self or if we're being the ideal that we think someone should want. If you can distinguish between those two, and take the higher um, road, and go in and just figure out that, or have the mindset is you're going to go and get curious, learn about the another person, and not be so tied to like the outcome. And so whether it goes well, doesn't go so well, your job, your mission, I guess you could say, when you're getting to know another person, is to see about what could be. Um, and be more open to it, because I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, I went out on this one date, and I really see it as like going places, and they're this and that, and they're so set on this future that they all of a sudden form an attachment, whereas maybe they should see what happens beyond those first few times. And you're right, you do have an idea of whether or not you have chemistry with somebody right away or not. It's either a yes or a no. However, there are different variations to how somebody might be the further time goes on, because some of us, we may not extend the trust right away. You might have to earn the trust, so that amount of effort and level of what you put into it, that takes time, and that's not going to be right off the bat. And the level of effort and the time you put in is going to change over time, because nobody can keep it up at that higher bar for extended periods of time. So that's like, okay, well, what happens when it looks like the level of effort is changing? Well, is it changing because you're at a point where there is a comfort and a trust level, and living day by day. We all have work obligations, and whatnot. And so that's going to play into it. It's not always going to be the fireworks, that you would get right away. It's going to level out. And so how you choose to continue on, that's going to show a lot about either person, about whether or not they can actually be independent and have a life and interests outside of what they choose to do together. Because I've seen some couples, they do everything together and then they don't know what to be like when they're separate. And then, the opposite could be true. They're so independent, they're never, together. And so you can have both extremes. And so really it's about figuring out that balance on what that should be.
Finding a middle ground, definitely, and that's where I've seen the both sides of the extreme as well. And it is in the beginning, I feel the more trust that you give, the more it's going to snowball, and the faster you get to another person. Because if you have those barriers to entry and you're not willing to let down your guard, then how are you meant to let the other person get to know you? And it's also a bit worrying nowadays because people are afraid to be, as I said before, vulnerable and display that bit of trust, that bit of honesty, and because they want to be perceived, because the societal standards have changed from how they used to be. You were dating all those years ago would have changed to how things have happened now. And you've probably seen that with your kids and such, and the way in which they go about things. You probably just shake your head and be like, well, why don't you just try the simple things instead of going above and beyond? That's something that's not going to work. And to speak upon how you said that they might go on one date, if someone goes on one date, they often come to a diluted decision instead of an informed decision, because they assume all these different things, or they don't have a clear picture. So they let themselves come up with this clear picture, and often their own expectations exceed what the other person's expectations are. So you might say that we're going to be together for so many years and we're going to go traveling, this, that, and everything, but only to realize that those visions get dashed the next date around, because you realize a certain part of information which changes the entire dynamic of the dates. So a lot of men nowadays, we worry about just getting rejected and not being good enough, or a lot of different things, especially with the big push in the Me Too movements and all the false allegations that come out with these sort of things. Is we don't want to do something wrong, but even when we do everything right, we can still be portrayed as the bad person, or the martyr, so to speak. I think that's the right word. And it's something that worries us because it's very one-sided. You can't just turn around and say a woman's been doing this, this, and this, because a lot of the times no one's going to believe you. It's been pushed to such a point where women have complete control over what happens to a man, whether it be with them having kids or even the first few dates. A woman could turn around and say, he's done this, this, and this. And that's, I think, where some of the fear comes out of having that confidence to ask a woman out, because they don't want to have the wrong things happen to them, or they don't know what the woman's going to do after a couple of dates. They don't know how she is. So I think that's where a lot of modern women nowadays need to understand that if you want a genuine male or a genuine person, you need to sometimes look at yourself. A lot of females nowadays have such a high standard that they don't understand that they're looking for a 10 when realistically they're just a 4, or they might be less. And it's because a lot of different factors that go around it, but sometimes it's just their personality in general. They might think that they're the king shit, so to speak, but they're nothing more than the average person. And that's where they fail to realize that they're setting too high of standards and expectations. So they get with someone that's on equal levels of them and being a four, they might not work out. They might not have the best job. They don't have clear goals. But that's only because they're attracting the person that they sort of are or they equal to. And it goes for males as well. If you want to attract that perfect partner, you need to be willing to elevate yourself, whether it be through or a combination of things being financial, um, mental, and physical. You can't just have one without the other two. You can be extremely wealthy, but be a fat slob who's never worked out in his day in a life and is mentally just not there. Or you could be extremely intellectual, but not be financially there or physically there. So there's always barriers. And same goes with fitness. You might be an absolute gym rat and be jacked to shit, but you might lack that confidence, that mentality required to ask a woman out. You might be financially unstable due to the amount of time that you're spending in the gym opposed to work or other activities.
Very well said for both sides of the equation, both men and women. So if what you are and what you put out there is what you're going to attract, that is true. And so if you want better, you got to be better. And you want honesty, you got to be honest. You want integrity, got to have integrity. And so, some things are going to be similar. There's opposites attract, of course. And so there's always going to be that. But really, at the end of the day, everyone has a choice in how they choose to show up and how they choose to be. And if they choose to be at that lower bar, well, then how can they expect that someone would come in at the higher bar just because they think that should happen? Things like that do not happen and stay around when you don't put in that honesty and effort and all of that. And a lot of times I like to share with people that the best thing they can do to form and nurture the relationships is to have that communication that's open and honest from day one. And a lot of times these sides of ourselves that we may not want to share, actually, if we're not doing that, I mean it just seems like, why would you be with someone that you couldn't actually be in your own skin? Being in your own skin is really important because we're not always gonna be in that place. And when you can quit assuming and start getting curious and asking questions and really getting intentional about the values that you share and the things that you want out of life, well, then life can be really good. Um, and I'm trying to think of what else I would say to this subject as we're going down it.
A couple of things that we could think about and remember too is the type of personality in which you have. So you might find a man who's got like a really high work ethic and likes working and being by himself. And you might find a female that you get with and they're quite the opposite. They do have a good work ethic and stuff, but they more so enjoy that personal time. And it's sometimes for better or worse. Sometimes it can hinder the relationship or enhance it because we often only find the people that we need at the right times for certain lessons. Not everyone in our life is going to be there forever, and it's understanding that some people you might only be with for a year or a couple of years, and then if you don't sit back and reflect on the lesson in which you've been taught, all lessons, you'll never come to the right conclusions. And with opposites of different types of people, sometimes you might have that female that wants that intimate time, but you're out working or you're doing stuff in the property or whatever it may be, and that slowly deteriorates the relationship because you're not building that intimate connection that she wants. And that's because she was expecting something different from you. She was expecting more personal time, but you're sort of a solidarity person, and that's where it can be confronting at first and make you feel like you're wasting time when you sit down to watch a movie or do something with your partner. And sometimes it's best to come to a compromise where You might be able to sit down with your partner, and instead of watching a movie, you might be able to help her work on her goals or help work on her business or do a couple of different things, but you're still building that connection. You're still having that one-on-one time with them, but you're not just sitting there doing nothing, because certain people don't enjoy to do nothing. They've got to be doing something constantly, and other people like to do nothing all the time. And that's where you'll have couples that just sit there and watch movies all day or sit there on the couch and they don't have a problem. But it's when you have a difference of personality that it can be a bit challenging to overcome that. And it could be the male wants more of personal time and the female is more of a solidarity worker. And it's just compromising sometimes and finding those midpoints. If you're not having enough personal time because you might be on opposite ends of the work schedule, you might have one person working till like, oh, 7 in the morning till 12 o'clock, and then another person working from 12 o'clock to 7 at night. And there's not a lot of time for personal time at the end of the day. So that's where you can book days away, whether it be a few times a month or something, to go on holidays, or not holidays, but just days out and spend time with one another and enjoy the company that you have. Because I know people that are like that, where they don't even get enough time to say hi and bye between them going to work and getting home. And it's sad to see, but they've realized that there's ways in which they can mitigate that. They understand that they have to work. There's no other workaround, but they make this time in make the time up in holidays and such, where they can go do things together or go for a travel like 4 hours away, go stay at some hotels for a couple of nights and build that personal connection back up. And it does take time to, or for both people to find what their likes and dislikes are and what their schedules are, because not always are we going to be able to assume what they like, because you'll usually make an idiot out of yourself. You might assume that, oh, he might like work more than me, or he might like doing this more than me because I'm this, and this. But it's not until you ask the questions and get to know why, and say like, well, why do you like going to work so much? Or why do you like, not so much going to work so much, but why do you like doing stuff out in the yard? Or why do you like going out with the boys? And it might be because they still lack the confidence, or they don't think that they're worthy enough. There might be other things going through the back of their head, because men deal with a lot of things, and that's where it's sometimes hard for us to open up about them at the same time. And that's sort of the reason why we've made the men's room and the men's circle in the beginning, because we want to have a place where men can understand these feelings, these reasons, and to touch upon why exactly we do what we do. Because this group was founded by you, because you were asked early on um, to speak upon men's issues from a woman's perspective, and a lot of men find that confrontational, and that's where it is hard to have equal conversations with men and women about men's topics, because women don't see the value in that a lot of times. And that's where it is sad, because they should understand that men go through their own issues and men have their own problems. And that's where someone like you're not willing to accept that. You understand that men have their own problems, yet you're willing to speak about them and make something for the better. And that's where I completely advocate for that too, because there's big problem with men's mental health and the confidence that we have and what a man should really be, and a lot of different things. And that's where I think there's a lot of benefits to the conversations in which we have on these groups. And going back to it being in a relationship, that's where we're able to gain the perspectives of females and males. If this was a male-only group, then it'd be a one-sided conversation, a one-sided debate, so to speak. But it's not. We're able to get each other's opinions and the way in which we've grown up and experienced certain things, because we might have the same experience, but they completely differ from either end of the spectrum. So, or we might have the same experience and then exactly the same. It's sometimes there's commonalities between the different sexes, and there's different things that we experience, yet some experiences are the same. Would you like to touch upon anything like this, Linda?
Yes, I would. And so you really spoke to why I feel that this is important, because when you're in a separate men's group or a women's group, then everyone tends to bring the societal views, the the views that we might have grown up with or experienced, and then you don't get to have different perspectives. And a lot of times there's some assumptions that can happen on both sides of the table. And when you can come together and have those open, healthy conversations, the dialogue begins to change. I can actually witness it when we're in a men's circle or we're doing a panel interview. And if you can watch and listen for the cues, they're there. And when I like to point to those, when I hear the words that someone's saying that maybe are those assumptions or those uh you know maybe limiting beliefs that they might have, and we can speak to them, then all of a sudden there's this new insight that maybe they could approach their communication and relationships differently. And so, I like to challenge, if you are experiencing something in a certain way and you're not happy with it, whether it's in your relationship with your partner or the relationship that you have with your work, well, then maybe, taking some different perspectives and see if you can go into it differently. Because the moment you can do that, you can have a different result. But sometimes we get so caught up in our heads that we're logically thinking about why we did something and how can we change it, when really it's more like, oh, I just need to accept that this is my value, this is who I am. And oh, it's okay for me to express myself in this way. And why wouldn't I? I mean, that's one right there, because, a lot of us think that we need to show up in a certain way rather than being who we actually are. And that's where assumptions even get made about us, right? So if I'm behaving differently than who I really truly am at the end of the day, well, then someone's going to get to know me in a certain way and have a different expectation. And so why wouldn't you want to be who you are right away? Get vulnerable and do that. It's a much better way of living. And, you know, in my work and the people that I coach, we talk about how, relationships, when you're in them with a partner, they evolve. Who you are when you're 20 is not the same as who you are when you're 50, and who you are when you're 70. You evolve and change over time, and that's your values. In some cases, they can change, your interests change, you have experiences that shape you, and you learning how to navigate those from day one sets you up for success.
That's exactly it, is finding those initial things that you like about the person, because, well, those personality traits, because usually they'll carry through the years no matter how old they get. And that's where you'll get these really old couples, and they'll be still have that time to be romantic or be really cute together because they've found that sort of spark in the beginning of a relationship and they haven't been willing to let it die. And then there's other sides of the spectrum where there's really old couples that are extremely bitter or don't like each other because they lost that spark. And that's where there are ways in which to mitigate that and find that connection again. It just takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of understanding, and it's realizing that you might be doing something wrong that the other one doesn't like, or they might be doing something wrong and it's rubbing you the wrong way. And that's where it's stepping back from the relationship sometimes. Like if you've been together for 10 years and all of a sudden you've started to find that something irritates you or something annoys you, it's because you've often haven't discussed something, or there's something that's confrontational by nature. So sometimes a person might change in a certain way and you might be like, well, I don't like the way this person is, but you might not ask why in which they've changed that way. They might have had something extremely big happen in their family. You might have thought, oh, it's just something that's happened in their family, but sometimes you don't realize that that action can have really big reactions with that relationship, because they might have been affected in such a way that alters the way in which they are, the way in which they just do things, because they might not want to do things out of lack of confidence, lack of ability to be able to speak up on their issues, because they don't feel like they're going to be heard or they're not going to be acknowledged. And that's where establishing those common grounds in the beginning ensures for a steady and healthy relationship. Because if you don't have times, like at least once a week, where you can sit down with your partner and discuss some of the problems that you've been facing, some of the solutions that you might be able to utilize, and then getting their opinion on them, then you'll never get to have that relationship that is extremely strong and will not break no matter what. A lot of couples nowadays just like to assume or like to put all the responsibility upon themselves and then wonder why there's a clashing of egos or clashing of personalities, because you've got two people that try to assume the role of the other person when they don't understand that it should be split. It should be 50-50. There are specific roles that the different genders have, and it's understanding that sometimes you might meet a woman that's completely opposite. She might like to go fishing and drive like fast cars and do burnouts and be a bit of a redneck, or you might meet another woman that's really classy, really respectable, and it's quite the opposite. And sometimes that can be good or bad depending on who and how you are. You might find that you're an extremely classy bloke, yet you meet a classy woman and it doesn't really suit you well. You like how she looks, but you don't like who she is, because some classy women can have really high standards, can want everything at a drop of a dime, where redneck women more understanding to situations. They're not stressed about the amount of money that you've spent, more so on the thoughts in which you've had. And that's where there are different calibers of partners, and same goes for men. You might meet someone who's in a business suit and has really high standards and wants to have everything um, high quality and worth a lot of money, and that might not be the type of man that you're seeking. It could be more of a man that's a bit more of a bogan or a redneck. I call them bogans in Australia, but those are the sort of people where they can come up with solutions out of nowhere, or they're more willing to have that sort of date that's a bit cheaper, or have those gifts that are a bit cheaper, and not um, think of it the wrong way, because a lot of guys do have high standards as well. It's not just one side of the fence. Both sexes will have high standards about certain things, and that's where you sometimes you only attract the person in which you are equal to, but sometimes you can find that high level person if you um, display enough confidence and vulnerability and trust within that person. Because I've seen that happen for myself. I know of a good mate who's a 4, but he's attracted an 8. And the only reason was because they both came to an understanding early on in their relationship. They didn't even want a relationship to begin with. They were just friends with benefits, and it turned into more than that. And because they display that confidence yet vulnerability, they sort of come to an understanding of, well, neither party wants anything yet. We may as well try it. And they're still together now, and they're about to buy a house soon, because they understand each other really well. They understand where they sit with each other. They have a lot of trust for each other. Yet in the beginning, it was a completely polar opposite. They didn't even want a relationship, and now they're going to get married in a few years. So it does vary on the spectrum. There's a lot of variability when it comes to relationships and certain issues, and that's where I'd say if anyone's experiencing issues within their relationships or life and they don't know what to do or the advice they might need, then contact us at the men's room, and we'll be able to have a one-on-one just speaking session, or me and Linda can jump on and help you out with certain topics, because a lot of people nowadays don't know where to turn. They don't know who to speak to. And due to the experience that we have with certain events and us being coaches of different calibers, we're able to help a lot of people nowadays. And hence why we've started this podcast and also the men's circle. And if you're curious about it, go to the YouTube channel, or the one you're watching it on, and go to the description. You'll find the men's room website there, and you can have a look at the men's circle, where it's a place where men are able to feel safe, able to feel like their opinions heard and valued, as well as get insights into questions and topics they might have. Or even if you have questions and topics that you might have about just anything in general, you can always come to the men's room and ask those questions, because you don't have to have your face on camera. You can just sit here and have a topic brought up from your discretion, and then we can talk about that topic. We're always open to different ways of thinking and talking. We're never closed off. Any thoughts you'd like on this before we sort of close it off?
Yes, I wanted to share too that the experience that we have here on the Men's Room Show interviews is different in the men's circles. And so in the men's circles, we are online However, we do not record any of these sessions. And
Mm.
really, I like what you said about if a person feels comfortable and wants to come on camera, great. If they're not feeling like they would want to come on camera, that's fine too. The only thing that we ask is that when you visit the Men's Room Show website, that you register so we know who you are and how we can get the joining link and materials to you. Because a lot of times in the men's circle, we do find that there are resources that we can share in all different modalities. And so we like to make sure that we have a way to share those once the conversation for the evening has closed.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of people nowadays do worry about how they're going to be perceived because of certain topics that they want to speak about or certain issues. And it's understanding that it's okay to talk about topics, but you sometimes don't have a place in which to talk about them or question those. And it's when you come to groups like ours, because we advocate for men's mental health and just men's health in general, because there's a lot of females groups out there, but that's where this group is different. This group was made by you, Linda, and it's a male's mental health group from a female's perspective, but it allows us to have these conversations. And I also would add, if you don't fully feel confident, then reach out to me personally if you just want to speak one-on-one with me, or you can reach out to Linda, vice versa. So you don't have to speak to the both of us at the same time. And it's understanding that we will do everything to the best of our ability to make sure that you walk away with some sort of value, some actionable steps that you can take to improve your life and your general well-being.
And with that, we will see you next week on the Men's Room Show.